You are watching the press preview, a first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with the writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and the political commentator Benedict Spence. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, first up, The Eye, which claims to have been told that Rishi Sunak has already decided to sack Home Secretary Suella Braverman for going rogue this week and is planning a cabinet reshuffle. Ahead of tomorrow's pro-Palestinian march in London, the subject of the row of the Home Secretary's controversial remarks, the Mail carries another plea from Mr Sunak for marchers to respect Remembrance Weekend. The Express carries similar sentiments. Remembrance is sacred, a moment of unity, of shared British values. The Times, which originally carried the Home Secretary's comments about the march, has the same lead story. Torn apart, that's the front of the Mirror, which says 2,000 police will be on duty to try to keep the peace on Armistice Day tomorrow. According to The Telegraph, they're prepared to use force if necessary. The FT looks ahead to the autumn statement and predicts that the Chancellor will cut business taxes to boost economic growth. The Sun leads with details of singer-songwriter Noel Gallagher's divorce settlement. And The Star reports on one supermarket chain's U-turn on self-service checkouts and the return of real human beings to the tills. I'm in favour of that. A reminder that by scanning the QR code you'll see on screen during the programme, you can check out the front pages of tomorrow's newspapers while you watch us. And we are joined tonight by writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and political commentator Benedict Spence. So let's take a look at the papers for you now. Welcome to you both. We're going to start with the Daily Mirror and looking ahead to Armistice Day tomorrow and the policing of the capital, unprecedented for a demonstration of this type. 2,000 police officers will be on duty. Benedict.
Yeah, and this is, of course, the story that everybody's sort of been building up to in anticipation and trepidation. It is, of course, very important to say that there is no plan for this march to actually go past the cenotaph. That is the key thing that I think is necessary to diffuse all tensions. Now, of course, with any major protest that you always get in central London, there will always be agitators, you always get hangers-on, you get people trying to cause mischief for their own reasons. So that is almost certainly why there are police there. They're not expecting the march halfway through to decide, oh, actually, you know what, chaps, we're going to really rile people up. We're going to go past the cenotaph. That's what it's about. It's about people being made to feel reassured as much as they can, and, you know, also for the marchers themselves. This is why there's a lot of police presence. It's not with the anticipation of going in and cracking people's heads. It's about making sure that everything is very orderly, everything is very calm, and everybody sort of keeps to what it is that they've said that they will do. And I think that that's the important thing. But let's also be very clear, it has been incredibly controversial that a march is happening on this weekend of all weekends. And, you know, you can see it from lots of different perspectives. A lot of people saying that this is perhaps, you know, the closest thing that we have to a broadly secular day in the UK where actually people can come together to remember people from across the spectrum. But equally, this is, you know, the issue of Israel-Palestine is incredibly emotive for an awful lot of people in this country and has been for decades. So you can understand why a lot of people would say in the here and now, this is something that has to be demonstrated against. Yes,
and Kate, as Benedict says, the march is not scheduled to go past the cenotaph, but we read that the police force are putting in place an exclusion zone to be set up around the cenotaph, and that would mean that any protesters who try to assemble close to the cenotaph or even be in that vicinity would be arrested.
Yes, I mean, I think it's important this march goes ahead. Whatever you think of the pro-Palestine marchers, whatever you think of what's happening in Israel, it is important that this march goes ahead, even if you don't agree with it. And I think that's the key thing that's sort of driven these decisions. You know, first of all, the independence of the police. As you know, we've seen there's been a bit of tension with Suella Braverman about that in the past few days. And, you know, the police are saying, you know, we don't think this meets the test to ban it, therefore it's going ahead. And I think that's really important.
The other thing to throw into the mix is that there are other marches taking place, some from the far right, and the Mirror just really reporting on some messages that have been going round chat groups, posted on football hooligan chat groups, they've got Yobs planning to attack demonstrators in London, calling for a Gaza ceasefire, including discussions on how to ambush protesters, some posts calling Muslims vermin and scum.
I think, I mean, as I said, this is why there does need to be a very large police presence, because people need to be reassured that, you know, splinter groups, that counter-protesters, that people within the main protest itself who misbehaves will be dealt with, and that ordinary people who want to protest are kept safe. But I think that we need to remember it's very easy to sort of just go in two-footed on, you know, the senseless, the football hooligans, the this, the that. The real danger comes from the far right, which unquestionably there is a danger. But this wouldn't be happening, actually, if there hadn't been rather a worrying amount, I think, of xenophobia and racism and violence, actually, at these marches. And again, let's be clear, not the majority of people by any stretch, but a significant enough amount that people are worried for this march on Remembrance, on Armistice Day weekend. And that is what has run a lot of this up. And, you know, I would say anybody who is watching who is thinking of going to a counter-demonstration, don't do it. It's not actually worth your while. The police are there to do a job. You are not needed to defend the cenotaph or anything like that. It is not a good thing to do. But sadly, we get this almost sort of whatever the cause is. If the march is big enough, you'll get somebody out there trying to cause trouble, trying to get their own sort of agenda in there. We have this, don't we? Every now and then you do see these rather small but rather nasty sort of far-right or yobbish groups. But that's not the main focus of what's going on here. I think we need to remember that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the main risk is obviously not that the cenotaph will be damaged or desecrated in any way, but that, you know, these groups with very different aims and protests will meet, and this is what the police are aiming to keep them apart.
Let's talk about Suella Braverman in the Daily Express, who we must remember poured a lot of heat into this discussion about these marches taking place for Armistice Day tomorrow and the pro-Palestinian march. The Express asking the question, should she be sacked, and could potentially a sacking actually backfire on Rishi Sunak?
I think it depends who he ends up replacing her with. I think that, frankly, she's
do
been
you think that
she's been very disloyal to the Prime Minister.
Do you think that she will be sacked?
I think there's a good chance that she will be sacked. I think that probably Rishi Sunak is waiting to see how the weekend plays off first. If there is any sort of sense of trouble, no matter how small, I think it gives him
blame her for
more of an opportunity to do so. But this idea that there might be a bit of a backlash within the party, I do understand where a lot of MPs and a lot of grassroots supporters are coming from, is that she says difficult things that other people aren't prepared to do. But she's not actually very good at saying it. She does come out with a lot of gaffes. And I think even people who are more sort of sympathetic to her wing of the party would probably say, if you were to say pick between her and, say, Priti Patel as the cheerleader for that movement, you wouldn't pick Suella Braverman. A lot of this strikes me as her sort of trying to get her name in the ring early to be a potential leadership candidate if and when Rishi Sunak is no longer leader. And I just don't think actually that's the person you want leading that wing of the party. I don't think that that's the person that leads the Tories back to success. As to whether or not she should remain in post, she's been disloyal to the Prime Minister. Yes, she should be sacked, but I do think that he's waiting. He's trying to be a little more Machiavellian than she is by saying, OK, well, you've made the statements, you can own this.
Kate, is she a completely divisive figure?
Oh, totally divisive. I mean, you only have to look through even just this piece to see there are lots of different Tory MPs saying different things. Some are really strongly supporting her, others are really distancing themselves from her. I mean, you know, it's all very well and good saying, you know, she might well be the Tory leader after the next election, but the bigger question is, will she still be Tory leader at the election after that? And, you know, how long are the Tories going to be in the wilderness if Labour wins the next election? She may never be Prime Minister, but she might well end up leading the Tory party at some point.
As I say, lots of good sound bites, but doesn't necessarily make a good leader.
Yes. The Eye's a bit more definite in their prediction. They're saying Braverman faces sack for going rogue, and this is part of the Prime Minister preparing a reshuffle anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be the first time she's been sacked.
No, I think no.
People forget about that in the sort of the upheaval of that period. But, you know, 2 for 2, that would be exciting. I do think she's on borrowed time, though. I just don't think that you can... It doesn't matter so much if, as some people suggest, the silent majority are whispering these things. If you're going against your leader, I don't really know what it is you can expect. If this was the Labour shadow cabinet minister, they'd probably already be out the door is the key thing. And I think it is only because, actually, there is quite such a groundswell of support and this event is happening now that she's managed to hold on this long.
Yeah, and also Sunak is quite weak about this. I mean, whether he's actually weak or whether he's seeming to be weak, either way, he's not just getting in there and sort of grasping the problem and dealing with it. I mean, I do tend to buy the theory that he's sitting tight to see how it goes over the weekend before sacking her, but he's backed himself into a place where he looks weak whatever he does.
What about this theory, Benedict, that the Home Secretary is trying to get herself sacked, then to be able to launch her leadership bid?
Again,
distance herself from the Prime Minister?
again, that would be, if let's say that that's true, you're gambling on the idea of there being nobody better than you to replace you if you're Suella Braverman. And the problem is actually there are better candidates out there. It's not often that you can say that there are better candidates currently in government who aren't standing down at the next general election. But in this case, I would actually say, I don't know whether she'd take the job, but Priti Patel would be the obvious one. Most people believe that she is more competent, she's better across the Home Office in general, and she has the support of that wing of the party. So if all of these MPs and these grassroots Tories are saying, oh, well, we'll be furious if he gets rid of Suella Braverman, if he just goes, all right, well, here's a lovely Priti Patel in your size, they'll go, oh, well, that's not the end of the world, is it? And that would neuter any sense of a sort of a leadership campaign in the bud, I would have thought.
Interesting analysis there. To the Times, the front page there, and a plea, it seems, actually, from Rishi Sunak, respect our sacred day. This is a plea to the protesters to make sure that it's all peaceful tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I'm not sure that kind of language is really going to land with protesters well, maybe with the sort of far-right protesters. I'm not sure it's going to land with the far-left protesters who don't necessarily have that kind of inbuilt respect, that Rishi Sunak seems to think everybody has. I mean, it's entirely reasonable to say, look, it's an important day for some people. Can you bear that in mind? But actually, I think, the fact that the march is being organised not to go anywhere near the Cenotaph, and, Remembrance Sunday isn't actually until Sunday morning, and this march is happening tomorrow, Saturday morning. So this feels like sort of, Sunak's trying to gain a bit of ground here and to gain a bit of gravitas, and it's a bit, a bit futile.
Do you not think it is following on from what he's been saying all along?
Yes, up to a point. I think the difficulty that I have around all of this, whether you're coming at it from far left, far right, whatever, is that Remembrance Sunday, Armistice Day, it's not just about remembering white British Tommies that died in the trenches. These were both. Yeah. Both wars were imperial wars. You had people from across the world, all religions, all backgrounds, fought and died for various principles. A lot of them did it with an eye on independence for themselves, but they did it on the understanding that if you didn't fight in this war, all of these options were off the table. And it's one of the great ironies, I think, actually, when you see, and we did see, I can't remember if it was Rochdale or something like that, somebody daubed Free Palestine on a cenotaph. Well, before the British actually did free Palestine from the Ottomans, the lot of the people in Palestine was significantly worse, and there was no prospect of statehood for the people of Palestine, be they Jewish or be they Muslim, before that happened. And I do think that a lot of this gets massively oversimplified. This is, as I said at the top of the show, really the one sort of secular day where we could all say, OK, you don't have to agree with empire, you don't have to agree with this war or that war. You can agree with the idea, though, that people were prepared to die for their beliefs, that they sacrificed themselves for that. And even if you don't agree with the causes, we should be able to respect that they did that they went knowingly often to their graves doing that, and that it cuts across all continents, all creeds. And
also that they died for the right to do things like have a march on November the 11th through the centre of London, even though we're building up to Remembrance Sunday. The war was, if nothing else, it was also about those freedoms, and that's a particularly important freedom.
Let's come back to the Middle East with the Times World, a spread that they've got on page 36 and 37. And this, they're describing the tinderbox that is the West Bank, which threatens to further inflame.
It does. I think the thing that's really being reinforced now to the Palestinians, and of course, let's remember here, not all Palestinians are supporters of Hamas, and many of them, even those that are supporters of Hamas, are not particularly happy at how this has played out, because there was this idea that this would suck other actors into the conflict. I think it has been made very clear to a lot of Palestinians that they really are alone, actually, in this, that most of the Arab world no longer sees the conflict as it did 10, 20 years ago. Iran is not riding over the hill anytime now, and that actually what Israel wants to do now it can effectively get away with for a period of time, because the United States and other Western countries have said, yes, this is an unprecedented attack that you've undergone, and we are giving you effectively carte blanche to do it in Gaza. Whether or not that happens in the West Bank, I'm not so sure, but of course Hamas is not really as strong in the West Bank, and I think a lot of the onus is going to be there on the Palestinian Authority to say to people, look, if you want to make your lives a lot easier, don't rise to the provocation. Do not rise to what Hamas is calling for, because really, statehood is off the table for the short term. Let's not take it off the table for the long term, which it will be if the Israelis feel we have to go in hard in the West Bank as well. For now, they kind of have carte blanche to do what they want.
And Kate, this article is looking particularly at attacks on Palestinians in the West Bank, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the picture there is complicated by the fact that there are settlements that are both sort of semi-legal and illegal on the West Bank, which is, Palestinian territory. And some of these are more hardcore settlers have actually killed Palestinians. And that really rises the temperature quite significantly. So that's, a worry that it is, as the headline says, a tinderbox. And, while the rest of the Arab world is standing off on this and sort of letting Israel kind of get on with it and Hamas get on with it, there is this concern that if it escalates in the West Bank, then that will just, lift the temperature quite substantially and risk a further escalation. And nobody wants that.
No, indeed. Kate and Benedict, thank you very much for the moment. We're going to take a break. Coming up, 54 years since their last #1 hit, how the Beatles made a chart comeback. More on that when we come back. Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, writer and broadcaster Kate Bevan and the political commentator Benedict Spence. We're going to have a look at the Times, first of all, and the Beatles, which Kate was just asking in the break whether I was old enough to remember their last... was it last #1?
Last #1, yeah.
I was alive.
So was I. Standard, if you weren't, I take it.
I assume I wasn't.
So, yes, tell us about this comeback.
So, yes, last week we got the launch of what was billed as the Beatles' final song, Now and Then. I mean, I would quibble with it being the Beatles' final song because it was a demo that John Lennon had made in the 70s after the Beatles had split up. And then in the 90s, while George Harrison was still alive, but obviously after John Lennon had been killed, Ringo, George and Paul got together to do some sessions. And this song, Now and Then, didn't quite make the grade for various technical reasons. And now, because we've got AI and much more advanced technology, it has been resurrected into a single called Now and Then, which is rather lovely. And it's #1, which is
That
amazing.
I didn't know.
Well, there you go.
Now there's no longer Top of the Pops. I don't know what #1 is. You probably don't know what Top of the Pops is, do you?
I'm seeing The Prodigy next week. That surprises a lot of people. But, I am aware of some popular music. I'm slightly niche, yeah.
What did you make of this track? Have you heard it?
I have not heard this, no.
Oh.
Again, because the sort of thing I listen to is The Prodigy. It's slightly unexpected. I went to university in Liverpool. I know what the Beatles are. A couple of chaps done very well for themselves. Not all around right now, but, such is life.
You get 5 out of 10.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the Star. I think this is probably just got time, our final story. And this is a supermarket getting rid of the virtual checkout, which I find incredibly annoying. I don't know about you. It always beeps and it's always not ready to go ahead when I'm there.
I would find that I do deal with tech. I write about tech. I'm a tech expert, and I cannot get out of my local supermarket without needing the assistant to come and sort me out at least once on those automatic tills. So I would love to see more tills with humans on them.
Frankly, as well, working in the media, you're always sort of one step away from not having a job, and so actually you kind of need jobs at places like supermarkets, just in case. So actually I'm really keen that they bring these back. And I mean, also, yeah, they never work, they beep at you, you need somebody to come and scan something anywhere because apparently you don't look 18, so you can't buy all of the bottles of lager that you're trying to buy. A frequent issue that I have. I think I applaud this measure.
You're a bit of a headbanger, aren't you?
Absolutely.
You've been asked to verify your age, have you?
I have, actually, yes. Before I started bringing the stuff back.
I think I'd throw a party if that happened to me.
Yes,
I'd be so flattered. It's never happened. I think we've just got time, about a minute, just to talk about Jeremy Hunt signalling that he might lower business taxes. Good news?
Well, this is the front of the FT, and what he said is, first of all, he says there's no room to cut taxes, but actually we might cut some business taxes. So that seems a bit sort of inconsistent, but, you know, consistent with sort of the way Tories think about these things. Yeah, they've had an interview with John Glenn, who's the Chief Secretary of the Treasury, and he said, apparently, Hunt said yesterday, cutting business taxes is the thing that's most important at this stage. So, you know, if you're a business owner, you'll be happy in the autumn statement.
This comes off the back of zero growth over the last quarter, which, to be honest, we've had more or less flat growth since the last financial crisis. So, you know, it's really, really exciting times to be in business right now. So I think any kind of little bit of alleviation is probably what you want right now.
And a little bit of a backtrack U-turn in terms of the Chancellor's promises?
I do think that they take it almost from day to day, actually, with this government, because, you know, inflation has been such a kick in the teeth for them that, you know, really they can't think that far ahead because they have to wait for the latest figures.
Apparently this is going to cost about £10 billion if they go ahead with it.
Oh, wonderful.
We shall see. Benedict and Kate, thank you very much. We shall see you in the 11 o'clock hour.